Hey, I'm Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking about the best new to me music that I found in the last quarter and recommend it to you to check out for yourself. I actually, down in the description, have a link to a Spotify playlist that you can go and listen to a sampling of tracks off the albums I'm going to talk about today. I'm actually going to be talking about them in the order as songs appear in that playlist. So let's go ahead and kick it off with The Clearing by Wolf Alice. This is my introduction to Wolf Alice. I'd heard of some of their music, but never got around to listening to any of their albums. Had this new album coming out and figured I'd give it a listen, though from what I understand, this new album actually might be a little bit of a departure from some of their sound on the other albums. So I'm interested to go back and listen to some of those as well. But my impressions of this, I mean, it's a nice kind of soft pop rock that kind of has this vintage feel. It almost sounds like it could be from like the 70s, but some nice hooks, just some nice, pleasant instrumentation. Not a lot here that was like blowing my socks off, but I enjoyed my listen of it enough that I intend to listen to some of their other albums. So interested to see kind of the difference maybe that I seem to be reading about in the difference between their sound on this album and some of their other ones. Next, we have the album I Don't Want to See You in Heaven by the Callous Daoboys. This is a band that I did not notice the joke wordplay of their name until I said it out loud. Callous Daoboys, Dallas Cowboys. It made me laugh when I realized it. This one is definitely a little outside of my comfort zone. The genre of metalcore is not really one that I've been drawn to. And admittedly, a lot that is here on this album is still not really my style. A lot of times the vocals are a little harsher than I'd like, and there's just maybe some more abrasion in the instrumentation. But there's some flashes here on this album of things that it's like, ooh, if they stayed in this lane, I actually really like this. And what's funny is it's probably the lane that fans of the band wish they would stay away from. You know, I went back and listened to their previous album, Celebrity Therapist, and actually found I didn't like that one nearly as much, and it was leaning more into the things that I didn't enjoy as much about their music. But I think that's the one that's kind of more highly regarded. But while this isn't an album that I think I'm really going to go back to in its entirety, there are a few tracks here that have stayed in my rotation. Specifically, Two-Headed Trout and Lemon are tracks that I really like. You know, it stays maybe just closer to the side of the genre that I enjoy, where it's kind of closer to just an alternative metal. And so I've enjoyed these as some heavier hitting tracks. Maybe I'll go back and give, the whole album a listen again since I've become more familiar with these tracks. Maybe I'll enjoy some of the rest as well. But definitely happy to have found a couple tracks that I like from these guys. Next up, we are going back to 1972, I believe. I'm not going to pronounce this right. Let's try. Clube da Esquina. We'll go with that. This is a very highly regarded Brazilian album from, I believe, 1972, and I'm always willing to give very highly rated albums a try, even if they're not in genres that I normally am drawn to. That said, I have been much more open to kind of non-English music after artists such as Natalia Lafourcade and Candelabro, among others, have surprised me as being non-English albums that have risen to be some of my favorite albums of all time. So I'm much more open-minded to go into these things, and I'm probably a little more used to some of the stylistic things that come from some of these genres. And this one is really intriguing. There is something immediately from the first track in this one that it has this very immediate and compelling sound, and it's kind of an interesting combination of genres, because there's clearly kind of this cultural, South American, some bossa nova influences here, but then it's like it's combined with kind of 60s, 70s, maybe Baroque pop influences of like the more, English speaking world side of the pop scene. And I don't know, it's the first track is really strong. There's a bunch of other tracks that I felt were strong as well on here, and it managed to stay compelling. It's somewhat simple instrumentation, but it comes together in a way that it has me intrigued. So this one is staying in my rotation for now. I mean, I know there's a few songs on it that I quite like, but I'm keeping the whole thing in because I know sometimes it takes some time for these types of albums to grow on me, and there's definitely something kind of special here about this one. Time will tell whether it's something that, I find myself wanting to keep coming back to or not. Next, we have Alan Sparhawk with Trampled Turtles with, I believe, the album by the same title. I was not really familiar with Alan Sparhawk, nor the Trampled Turtles, though I had heard of them, and I think I knew that they were kind of a more bluegrassy band. But from the open track here, the kind of bluegrass tinted instrumentation and then Alan's kind of raw vocals with these big harmonies coming through immediately captured my attention. And I quite like the vibe of the first track here. Looking into this a little bit more, Alan is more well known for his band Low, which was with his longtime wife and creative partner, Mimi Parker, who in 2022 passed away. So there's the context for this album is like, this is a guy that's grieving the loss of his longtime both creative partner and romantic partner. And it comes through on this. I mean, there is a palpable sadness and kind of grief on this album, some poignant lyrics. And the way it comes together with the kind of backing folk bluegrass instrumentation, it's really nice. I really, find it to be compelling, and I've come back to it a few times already for kind of full listens through. So definitely one that, especially if you like kind of a more folksy singer-songwriter with some bluegrass kind of in it, I think this one is definitely a very cool one to check out. Next, we have Cinema by the Marías. The Marías album Submarine has been one of my most played in the last year. It just is such a nice take on kind of the pop genre. They're very tight and funky, but also lush. I have a hard time describing it, but there's this just nice way that their music sits and kind of her ethereal, lush vocals over the top of it. And a lot of just catchy tracks on there. So finally got around to checking out their debut album. And a lot of what I love about Submarine is also true here. I think Submarine is feels like the more mature, more consistently strong album. But this is still quite good. And there's still a lot to like here. They have a really tight and groovy angle to this kind of chill bedroom pop. And it's nice on the ears. It's nice on the ears. It gets you grooving. So yeah, I really like what the Marías are doing. Next up, I have Racing Mount Pleasant with their self-titled album, Racing Mount Pleasant. I actually discovered this band before they changed their name. They were Kingfisher previously. And back in 2022, I listened to their album, Grip Your Fist, I'm Heaven Bound. And I felt like that was, of all the albums I listened to from that year, was one of the underrated ones. Really enjoyed that one. And so I was looking forward to this one from when I first kind of heard that they were going to be releasing another album. That excitement was then amplified by the fact that they were going to be opening for Geese, a band that I've been really, really enjoying, at the concert that I was going to see Geese. So I was like, oh man, I'm going to get to see these guys live as well. So more on that later, but I'm glad to say that their sophomore effort here is excellent. It's a lot of what I liked about their first one. They have it's not a small band. I don't know if they have 7 or 8 band members, and so they've got a horn section, and they've got violin, and so there's a lot of room they got saxophone. There's these lush soundscapes that they create, and a lot of these tracks are pushing 7-8 minutes. With very kind of subdued vocals, and it really builds, but there's some high highs in these tracks with some big payoffs for this, for the builds out of these more subdued sections that really feels like it earns the length of some of these songs. And really you get that payoff of the whole build. It was very cool to see them live. They're excellent live, and just these big builds to be in the room with it and just sit in these and to those climaxes is just really, really nice. So enjoying this one. I do find it's an album and a band that the songs can blur together for me a little bit. Like, I've listened to this album several times and I still will mix up which songs are which, or, you know, they're sitting in a similar sonic space for a lot of it. But it's really good. And I've found with albums like this in the past, it really just takes time of listening more and more for the songs to kind of individualize more, in my brain. But really, really happy with this. And it was super fun to get to see them live. Speaking of which, they opened for Geese, and Geese dropped a new album called Getting Killed. And this was definitely my most anticipated album of the year, because Geese's 2023 release, 3D Country, has just ascended into my top albums of all time. I absolutely love that record. And so it's always hard. You know, you're going in knowing like it's almost certain not to meet, you know, how much I like this other album, but you're just hoping it's still going to be good and a lot of what you really like about it. And fortunately, Getting Killed is quite good. I still am probably in the camp that 3D Country is my favorite. I say probably, I definitely am. 3D Country is my favorite, but that's less of a knock on Getting Killed and more about just how much I like that specific album. It's interesting. There definitely is like a change in direction, I would say, on Getting Killed. A little bit more traditional, like pop song structures to these things, as far as like verse and chorus and some of the hooks. It's a little bit more meandering, but meandering in a very groovy, funky way. They play with a lot of time signatures and stuff on here. You know, the opening Trinidad, I think, is in 13/8. So, you know, if you want to try to count that out, and a lot of it is really cool. And the more I've listened to it, the more it's kind of grown into just an album I really like in its own right, kind of, besides the fact that it's following up one of my all-time favorites. So just absolutely love what Geese is doing. You know, they're really one of my top bands right now as far as my level of interest. Like, if they're releasing a new album, like, they're probably in my top 5 that I'd be most excited to be getting new material from. So, and it was very cool to get to see them live as well. So that was pretty killer concert to get to see, you know, 2 of the top albums that I've listened to so far this year. I got to basically go see performed in the same concert. Next up, we have the album Patience Moonbeam by Great Grandpa. It's kind of a funny name for a band, but this is kind of a cool combo of indie rock and indie folk that kind of effortlessly blends the two together. You know, there's times this gets a little heavier and a little more weighed back, and I think that really helps the interest of it in kind of keeping you just intrigued. You know, I find sometimes there's albums in this genre that just like kind of just don't have enough to keep me interested from track to track. But this does some interesting things. You know, it's fun to find a album that's in such a kind of well-trodden genre, but manages to feel fresh. And I feel like there's a lot that was fresh here. It's been kind of a slow grower for me, but a grower, and one that definitely put Great Grandpa on my radar. My Great Grandpa on my radar. I intend to check out their other albums. I think they have maybe 2 others as well. So definitely we'll be looking at those. Next, I have Sinister Grift by Panda Bear. This was my introduction to the solo work of Noah Lennox, who goes by Panda Bear, who is also one of the founders of the band Animal Collective, which is kind of funny because Panda Bear. I have heard of Animal Collective. I haven't really listened to Animal Collective either. So this, I guess, is really my intro to his work in general. And there's nothing here that, like, this album's good. It's not, it's definitely as a whole album, not like one of my top ones of the year, but there's just some really nice kind of, I'd say, psychedelic sunshine pop type of stuff on here with the harmonies and just kind of fun arrangements. It's another one that kind of has that like retro modern feel. You know, I mentioned before the Lemon Twigs. They're really my hit in that genre. They're the one that I really, really love a lot of what they do. But this one has been a nice one to listen to as well. There's definitely a few tracks specifically that I've enjoyed off this one. So if that's your lane as far as liking that kind of more happy psychedelic pop, I'd give this one a listen. Next, we have a non-English album. This is Neumonía by Déjenme Dormir. This is actually the debut album from this Chilean band that I think is a fairly not well-known band. I would put it in a similar lane as something like The Strokes as far as kind of this straightforward, driving indie rock, kind of guitar-driven. And it's just a nice rocking listen. It's got some nice hooks with some of the more pop-leaning tendencies. So if I definitely think it's worth a look for fans of this genre. It's one that I've kind of kept around in rotation. It's hard to say the staying power of it for me. You know, it is a hard genre, I think, to really stand out in. But I really liked a lot of what I heard here. Next, I have Amir by Tamino, and this is actually completing me going through Tamino's discography in reverse. So I actually started with his most recent Every Dawn's a Mountain and worked my way back. And this just continues what I enjoy about his music. I think if you like one of his albums, you're probably going to like all of his albums. I think the standout here is definitely the opener Habibi. Very haunting atmosphere and just a ridiculous vocal range on display here. I mean, it opens with these verses where he's by the end of the verse dropping down to this really low, and then he jumps up into this higher chorus, which, you know, he starts showing it off a little bit. But by the end of the song, he lifts the chorus another octave and is just in the stratosphere. So pretty impressive, just his technical chops as a singer, but a well-written song too. And I think the rest of this album, just like I said, it shows his strengths in the same way that I saw his strengths on his other albums. And so consider me a fan. I've completed his 3 album discography at this point. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on anything he's got coming up. Speaking of another artist that I was introduced to with one of their new albums, and I'm working back, this is a pretty common theme for me. This is Father John Misty with God's Favorite Customer. So my introduction to Father John Misty was through Mahashmashana, which is still my favorite. Really has been an album that has grown into, I guess one of my favorites. Spoiler, I think it squeaked onto my top 50 albums of all time. So definitely enough to make me want to go back and listen to all of his other albums as well. And God's Favorite Customer, my initial impressions is that it's also quite strong. Not quite maybe to the level of Mahashmashana, but he's clearly a very strong songwriter, and the instrumentation he has with kind of more piano driven and orchestral and kind of his vocal delivery and phrasing, he gets this unique sound compared to maybe other pop rock. And so I haven't listened to a lot that I would say reminds me of kind of his sound, but it's a very compelling sound, and his the way he brings these songs together. So I've enjoyed this one so far. I'm continuing to work my way back through all of his albums. So yeah, I'm curious if you're a fan of Father John Misty, maybe let me know what your favorites are by him. So far, Mahashmashana remains mine. And last, if you're feeling a little more adventurous, I've got Ode to Wither by Wang Yiling. That's the English translation. This is actually a Chinese album that I would say is kind of this art folk pop. And it's one of those albums that, the soundscapes here really take you on this journey. You feel like you're really going through, there's albums that just the way they flow and the way they kind of play with different sounds, and I don't know, it's more atmospheric. And this is really tasteful here. I think it remains interesting and surprising throughout. I've only listened to it a couple times, and as I was kind of finalizing this list, I was like, man, I really got to go back and give this one another listen. I don't speak Chinese, so I don't know what she's singing about, but yeah, really genuinely beautiful passages throughout here, but also just like some interesting different things on the palette of sounds here. So definitely, if what I'm describing intrigues you, or just go give it a listen. You'll probably know pretty quickly whether it is one that you might enjoy. But that is all I have for this quarter. Always looking to discover new music. I'll be releasing one of these every single quarter. Let me know if there's anything that I should check out for the next one.